It's hard to believe that it's been 10 years since the first season of True Detective, arguably one of the greatest detective shows ever made.
I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution.
And with seasons 2 and 3 not nearly as critically acclaimed as the first, HBO is hoping for a return to form with everyone's favorite lamb silencer, Jodie Foster. And I gotta say, we are off to an amazing start with this first episode. Now in this video, we're gonna become detectives ourselves, taking a deep dive into every little clue you might have missed to see if we can figure out who the killer or killers are. Are we actually dealing with some sort of supernatural force, or is there a logical explanation? We'll explore every angle, and I encourage you, if you have your own theories, to leave them in the comments below. Finally, make sure to like and subscribe. If this video does well, I'll come out with even more True Detective content. Let's take a quick look at this quote here. You'll note that Hildred Castaigne isn't a real person, rather a fictional character from Robert Chambers' short story, The Repairer of Reputations. This metaphorical statement is all about how the night can bring out the worst in people, and that even God cannot control what happens in the dark. Fitting for the town of Ennis, Alaska, which can see over a month of complete darkness from December to January. In fact, we open on the last day of sunlight with this particularly disturbing scene of reindeer plummeting to their deaths for no apparent reason. The show is really trying to make us believe that some sort of supernatural force is at play here, but what if I told you that's not the case? That every weird thing we've seen in this episode can be explained with science.
Yes, science!
These deers could have been compelled to fly over this ridge if there's been a change in the Earth's magnetic field, something NASA claims has happened over 180 times in the last 83 million years. We're actually 200 to 300,000 years due for one. The Earth's magnetic field is what animals use to navigate during migration. It's how salmon know how to make it back to their spawning grounds, or how geese know how to go south in the winter. This magnetism could also explain the interference with the radio and electricity throughout the episode. But what if it's not magnetism, rather something more nefarious that was uncovered at the Salal research facility? The scientists here have been collecting ice samples that have been buried for millions of years with the hopes of gaining clues on the origin of life. What if they unleash something frozen for millennia? It's something out of the movie The Thing, which is fitting since there's a Thing VHS among their movie collection. The name Salal comes from a Hebrew word meaning to become dark, fitting since that's what the days become here. It's also a reference to an Antarctic island inhabited by cannibalistic aliens in Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. These are tiny clues we want to keep in mind as the story progresses. Now, things seem pretty normal at this Arctic base. That is until one of the scientists, Raymond Clark, arrives absolutely shaking, saying,
"She's awake."
For those of you with a good eye, you'll recognize the winter coat he's wearing is the same one Detective Liz Danvers found out belonged to murdered activist Annie Kotok. You can barely see the smiley face patch which was used to fix the hole in its side. How did he come into possession of this? Notice also the snow. This guy was recently outside. But who is he referring to when he says she's awake? It's likely Annie Kotok, since it's believed it's her tongue that is later found at the base. When Annie was murdered, her tongue was ripped out. But Annie's been dead for more than 6 years, making this all the more perplexing. Side note, when Liz investigates the base, she notes that Raymond Clark was the only person in the crew to have his own room. I also want you to listen very closely to this. It sounds almost like a radio or TV abruptly turning off, which would align with the magnetic field theory. If these reindeer were compelled to fly off to their deaths, could the scientists at the station be compelled to travel off into the Arctic night without their cell phones or proper attire? 3 days later, Detective Danvers arrives to investigate the missing scientists, and it's almost as if everyone here stopped what they were doing and simply vanished. From the uneaten popcorn and sandwiches, Ferris Bueller's Day Off on repeat, Lee G's unfinished treadmill run, and the wet laundry in the washer. I took a moment to read some of the Salal website pages, and we learned that their main mission is to, quote, expand the understanding of the origins of life. They say this can be done by sequencing the DNA of cells they found in the ice, and they can potentially use this sequencing to cure a number of diseases, which could lead to one of the greatest scientific discoveries of all time. Liz's initial investigation into the base also gives us subtle clues about our characters characters that may play into the broader story. Starting with Liz, she's forgetful, not knowing that her own glasses are in her coat. Hank also tells his son Peter to speak up around Liz, suggesting Liz's hearing is not that great.
Speak up, Peter.
I can hear him just fine.
Liz has or had a kid.
The things you learn when your kid leaves their lunch in the backseat of the car.
Later in the episode, Liz will have a nightmare in which a young boy named Holden says the same line as Raymond Clark, "She's awake." This is followed by her picking up a one-eyed polar bear stuffy. We'll actually see a real one-eyed polar bear later on, which is accompanied with, you guessed it, "She's awake." Back in the city, we get our first look at State Trooper Evangeline Navarro investigating a case of domestic abuse. As we'll see in this episode, Navarro has an obsession with protecting women, and this likely has something to do with her past with both her mother and time serving overseas. This extends to her sister Julie, who suffers from an undisclosed mental illness. It's implied that Julie has spent a lot of time in various mental hospitals as she begs her sister not to be sent to one. Julie is adamant that she is not like their mother, suggesting their mother may have also suffered from a mental illness, one which negatively affected the family. If you listen carefully, you'll hear the owner of Blue King Crab Company tell Navarro that there haven't been a lot of crab this year and it's only getting worse. Guess what? Blue King crabs are migratory animals, yet another piece of evidence which backs this magnetic field theory. But the most mysterious of all the characters introduced this episode has to be Rose Agano. She seems to be this loner living on the outskirts of town, and the first time we see her, she's gutting a wolf. That's gotta be some sort of symbolism. Well, she's visited by a vision of a man named Travis. Travis, according to Navarro, is dead. Now, right before Rose sees Travis, that weird radio manipulation sound is heard, suggesting that this is all in Rose's head. I'm inclined to believe that whatever compelled the scientists to leave their base is the same thing that compels Rose to follow Travis. In fact, whatever power this is may manifest in different people in different ways. Navarro believes that there is some connection between the cold case of Annie K and the missing Salal scientists. Before moving to the state troopers, she was a detective working on this particularly brutal case. She states that whoever killed Annie must have really hated her, stabbing her over 30 times with a star-shaped weapon, cutting out her tongue, and forensics stating that her body was kicked after she was already dead. Annie was hated by a lot of people in town due to her opposition of a local mine, a mine which is the lifeblood of the town. As Annie's brother says,
You kill the mine? You kill Ennis?
So there could be a lot of people with the motive to kill her. I want us to keep in the back of our minds the name Kate McKittrick. She's only mentioned once in this episode, but Annie was known for showing up to Kate's house to, quote, demand answers. So something is definitely going on here. Navarro would be kicked off Annie's case.
We both know what really happened.
We aren't exactly sure what this was, but this prompted Navarro to be transferred to the state troopers, so this will undoubtedly be explored in future episodes. There's also something really confusing about Liz's attachment to the case. On the one hand, she tells Navarro to let it go because the killer will never be found, but on the other, she's still actively exploring the case, even going so far as to get Detective Pete to steal his father's files on Annie K. Why continue on with the investigation if you truly believe the killer will never be found? Now, this is also another big mystery. Why is Officer Hank so hesitant to give up these files? According to Hank, there was some sort of flood at the department and the files were brought to his place. A flood would definitely be a convenient thing to happen if you wanted some damning evidence to be destroyed. Liz is called by a concerned mother after Leah is found making a pornographic video with this woman's 15-year-old daughter, or 16 as Leah states. We know that Leah isn't Liz's biological daughter, but the two live together and Liv seems to be this mother-like figure to her. It also begs the question, is there or was there a man in Liz's life? We do know she had a son, and Navarro even hints that Liz might have had a connection with someone on the force.
How's Daddy Conley?
Pointing at a picture of her and another man. When Liz and Leah are almost hit by drunk driver Stacy Chalmers, Liz has a quick flashback of her as a child stepping on broken glass. It makes me wonder if a drunk driver killed someone close to her in her past, which would explain why she's particularly harsh against Stacy. Peter here has a son named Darwin with his wife Kayla. Darwin is a fitting choice considering Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution. It is evolution, or where life came from, that the scientists at Salal have come to study. As a side note, Peter tells Liz that Salal's funding comes from an NGO and another contributor, but he's cut off by a drunk Stacey Chalmers before we ever get to hear who this mysterious funder is. The only other big player that we've been introduced to so far is the mining company. Peter is also having to deal with his father's new fiancée, a mail-order bride from Russia, something Hank prepares for by repainting his home. Darwin has drawn this creepy picture of a local legend, in case you thought this show hasn't leaned too heavily into the supernatural. I think that this is a misdirect. One of the weirdest scenes in this episode is Navarro's relationship with Havoc. She basically uses him for sex, and I found it a bit uncomfortable that during the deed he tells her to wait, but she keeps on going. And don't get me started on the toothbrush. Liz continues to investigate the murder of Annie K. Finding the coat from one of Annie's arrest photos is the same as the one worn by Raymond Clark at the Salal station, so she treks back there looking for any more clues. And to her surprise, Navarro is also there. Meanwhile, Rose continues to follow Travis, who does this weird dance almost as if he's channeling something. For a brief moment, we can even see this flicker in his eye, although I can't be 100% sure this isn't a reflection of Rose's flashlight. Regardless, I still don't believe Travis is an actual dead body leading Rose along, rather that this is something in Rose's mind. Liz's search does not turn up Raymond or Annie's parka, and both she and Navarro get in a fight over whose fault it was that Annie's killer was never caught. At the end of the day, Navarro is shut down because she was the one in charge, and she failed to solve it. It's for this very reason this case still haunts her. The episode ends with Liz and Navarro being called out to what Rose discovered in the frozen tundra. 3 bodies encased in ice looking as though they've been frozen in place. I'm assuming that these are 3 of the scientists, but I wasn't able to 100% confirm considering the state of their bodies and what little time we actually saw of the scientists at the beginning. But there are several interesting things to note here. First, these guys are buried deep within the snow. Check out the chainsaw here in the background, which has barely made any dent into the ice. It takes a while for this kind of stuff to build up, and since it's only been about 3 or 4 days since they went missing, I doubt that's enough time for them to get buried all the way up here. Second, they appear as though they've been frozen in time. Look at the petrified looks on their faces, holding their hands in front of them as if to defend themselves. These aren't people who have slowly succumbed to the cold weather. Granted, if they are seeing visions, it's possible they could freeze in that position. Additionally, we don't know if they were killed here or killed somewhere else and then brought here. We have to keep all our options open. Third, it looks as though they are naked, or at least missing several articles of clothing. We can see this guy's bare shoulder. Thus, the episode ends with far more questions than it answers. But now we move on to our trailer sleuthing section, where we take a look at the season's trailers for clues on what could happen next. Keep in mind, I won't be covering every clip, only the ones I think are relevant to the story. It looks like we're going to get a flashback of when Liz and Navarro worked together on a case. We can see Navarro has her APF police uniform on here, and it seems they were a little bit too late to stop this man and a dead woman in front of him. Did Navarro make a mistake that resulted in them not reaching her in time? The frozen bodies appear to have been branded with a swirl mark on their foreheads, a mark Navarro says she's seen years ago on a case she worked. Liz and Navarro team up for this case, and it looks as though they bring the frozen bodies to a local hockey arena for further examination, with Liz concluding these men died before they froze and that their injuries may have been self-inflicted. We get this shot of someone wearing Annie and Raymond's parka, and that sure doesn't look like Raymond. Jules has some sort of mental break, and it looks as though Navarro has to put her in hospital, the one thing she told Jules she wasn't going to do. It looks as though we'll also get a flashback of Annie protesting the Silver Sky mine. This sign over here stating "Protect our water" really stuck out to me, considering Ryan said the water hasn't been drinkable for 3 days. Maybe the mine is trying to cover something up, and with the scientists researching ice, maybe there's some sort of connection with the water. Here's a shot of someone disposing of a dead body, so likely no supernatural monster killing all these people. However, we do get this spooky shot of the woman who looks a lot like the one found dead in the home Liz and Navarro discovered. I'm guessing this is a nightmare, dream, or some kind of vision and not an actual monster. Also, this does not look good at all. Here we get a shot of who Navarro called Daddy Connolly. He's telling Liz to get her shit under control. Either this is a flashback and he was her former boss, or he's somewhere higher up in the chain of command and comes to check in on what the hell is going on in Ennis. It also looks like we'll get more flashbacks from Navarro's time in the military, and also a flashback of Liz and her son Holden. With Holden not around, I'm sad to think of what happened to him. Navarro will get dragged by this guy at their research station. Is this Raymond Clark? It's hard to tell. Navarro gets the upper hand, however, and has him tied to a chair. If you look really closely, you'll see someone else by the doorway, perhaps Liz. Liz here doing some sort of recorded interview similar to detectives Rust and Marty in season 1. I'm wondering if she's responding to a past case or the one we're watching right now. So that leaves us with episode 1. I don't know about you guys, but this first episode was very promising. But what did you think? I want to hear your thoughts and theories on the season in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and for more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember, Daddy loves you very much.